The three sons of Kairos beat down mercilessly on the dusty marketplace, turning the air itself into a shimmering veil of heat. Marcus Webb wiped the sweat from his forehead for what felt like the 100th time that morning, squinting at the sparse crowd that wandered between the merchant stalls. His own booth looked particularly pathetic today, half-empty shelves, displaying goods that nobody seemed interested in buying. Another stellar day in paradise, he muttered to himself, adjusting the faded canopy that provided minimal shade. 6 months on this desert planet, and he was no closer to making his fortune than when he'd arrived. The other human traders had warned him that Kairos was a tough market, but Marcus had been confident. Too confident, apparently. His stomach growled, reminding him that he'd skipped breakfast to save credits. All he had left was a single nutrition bar, tucked in his jacket pocket, his emergency reserve. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd come to the frontier to escape poverty on Earth, only to find himself nearly broke on an alien world. The marketplace was beginning to empty as the heat reached its peak. Most sensible beings retreated to climate-controlled buildings during the worst hours of the day. Marcus was about to pack up early when he noticed her. She sat in the shadow of the ancient stone fountain at the market center, her form hunched and small. At first glance, she appeared humanoid, but her skin held an otherworldly quality, pale and luminescent, like moonlight given form. Her hair, a cascade of silver white, hung in tangled waves around her face. The simple gray dress she wore was torn at the hem and stained with dust. What caught Marcus's attention most were her eyes. Even from a distance, even dulled by apparent exhaustion, they held a striking quality, deep violet with flecks of gold that seemed to catch the light. She was watching the merchants with an expression that mingled hunger with something else. Pride, perhaps. Or defiance. Marcus recognized that look. He'd seen it in his own mirror, often enough back on Earth, before he'd scraped together enough credits to book passage off-world. It was the look of someone who'd fallen on hard times, but refused to beg. He glanced down at his meager goods, then at the nutrition bar in his pocket. The logical thing to do was save it for himself. He needed his strength if he was going to turn his fortunes around. But logic had never been his strongest suit when it came to people in need. Before he could second-guess himself, Marcus grabbed the nutrition bar and walked toward the fountain. His boots kicked up small clouds of red dust with each step. The woman didn't look up until his shadow fell across her. "Excuse me," Marcus said, crouching down to her level. Up close, she was even more striking. Her features were delicate and symmetrical in a way that seemed almost too perfect, and her skin had an iridescent quality that shifted subtly in the light. She regarded him with those remarkable eyes, wary but curious. "Yes, I noticed you've been sitting here for a while," Marcus continued, feeling suddenly awkward. He pulled out the nutrition bar and held it out to her. "I thought you might be hungry. It's not much, but it'll keep you going." The woman stared at the offering as if it were something dangerous. Her violet eyes flicked from the bar to his face and back again. "Why would you give this to me?" Marcus shrugged, giving her a small smile. "Because I've been where you are. Because someone once helped me when I needed it. Because it's the right thing to do. Take your pick." "You don't know me," she said softly, but her gaze lingered on the nutrition bar. "I could be anyone." "True," Marcus admitted, "but everyone deserves kindness, regardless of who they are. Besides, you look like you need it more than I do right now." That last part was debatable, given his own situation, but Marcus didn't elaborate. The woman continued to study him with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking past his skin and bones, reading something deeper. Finally, slowly, she reached out and took the bar from his hand. Her fingers were cool against his, and he noticed they trembled slightly. "Thank you," she said, and there was something in her voice, a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his chest. This is unexpected. Life's full of surprises, Marcus replied, standing up. I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Webb. Seraphine, she said after a moment's hesitation, and Marcus noticed she didn't offer a family name. Another sign of someone trying to leave their past behind, perhaps. Well, Seraphine, I hope things get better for you soon. He turned to head back to his stall, but her voice stopped him. Wait, when he looked back. She was standing now, the nutrition bar clutched carefully in both hands. Why did you really give this to me? Humans are known for being practical, for looking after their own interests first. You're clearly struggling yourself. I can see it in your stall, in your clothes. So why? Marcus considered the question seriously. I guess because I believe we're all connected somehow. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates ripples. Maybe someone will help me when I need it most because I helped you today. Or maybe it doesn't work that way at all, and I'm just a fool who gives away his last meal. He grinned. Either way, I can live with myself. Something shifted in Seraphine's expression, a softening, a warming. The hint of a smile touched her lips. A fool who gives away his last meal, she repeated thoughtfully. Yes, perhaps. Or perhaps something more. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, she tucked the nutrition bar into a hidden pocket of her dress with surprising care. I won't forget this kindness, Marcus Webb. I suspect we'll meet again. I hope so, Marcus said, surprised to find he meant it. There was something about her that intrigued him beyond her obvious beauty, a sense of depth, of hidden layers waiting to be discovered. Seraphine inclined her head in a gesture that seemed oddly formal, almost regal, then turned and walked away through the marketplace. Marcus watched her go, noting how she moved with unconscious grace despite her bedraggled appearance. Even in poverty, there was something dignified about her bearing. He returned to his stall with a lighter heart, if a heavier stomach. The afternoon stretched on, hot and slow. He managed to sell a few items, enough to buy himself dinner. At least, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the mysterious woman with violet eyes as the suns began their descent toward the horizon. Painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus packed up his remaining goods. The marketplace was nearly empty now, just a few stragglers heading home. He allowed himself one last glance at the fountain where Seraphine had been sitting. She was gone, of course, but something about the encounter stuck with him. It felt significant, though he couldn't say why. Perhaps it was just the loneliness of being so far from Earth, making him attach meaning to a simple act of charity. Or perhaps, as Seraphine had suggested, it was something more. Marcus shouldered his pack and headed toward his rented room in the cheaper quarter of the city. The streets were alive with evening activity now that the heat had broken. Aliens of a dozen species moved past him, some bipedal like humans, others with forms that defied easy description. He'd grown accustomed to being a minority here, one of only a handful of humans on Kairos. His room was small and sparsely furnished, but it was home. Marcus set down his pack and collapsed onto the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. His stomach rumbled again, reminding him of the meal he'd given away. Worth it, he told himself firmly. And somehow, despite his empty stomach and emptier pockets, he believed it. Outside his window, the 3 suns finally dipped below the horizon, and the twin moons of Kairos began their rise. The night brought cooler air and the sound of nocturnal creatures chirping in the distance. Marcus drifted toward sleep, unaware that his simple act of kindness had set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the fate of 2 worlds. In a crystalline palace on the other side of the city, Princess Seraphine stood on her private balcony, the nutrition bar still carefully preserved in her hand. Her attendants had been shocked by her appearance when she'd returned dusty, disheveled, having spent the day disguised among the common people. It was a test she performed occasionally, gauging the character of those who inhabited her father's kingdom. Most failed. Most saw her disguise and looked away, unwilling to help someone they perceived as beneath them. But this Marcus Webb, had seen need and responded with immediate generosity, even at cost to himself. Seraphine smiled into the night, her violet eyes reflecting moonlight. "Yes," she whispered to the wind. "We will definitely meet again, Marcus Webb, and perhaps you will teach my people what true nobility looks like." She turned back into her chambers, already planning their next encounter. The universe, she had learned, had a way of bringing together those who were meant to find each other. And if fate needed a little help, well, she was a princess. She could arrange anything. The summons arrived 3 days later, delivered by a palace courier, whose ornate uniform made Marcus feel even more conscious of his threadbare clothing. The sealed envelope bore the royal crest of Kiros, a crystalline star wrapped in flowing script that seemed to shimmer with its own light. "There must be some mistake," Marcus said, staring at the elegant parchment. "I'm just a merchant. A not very successful one, at that." The courier, a tall being with copper-toned skin and 4 arms, remained impassive. "There is no mistake. You are Marcus Webb of Earth, currently residing at the Traveler's Rest Inn, merchant license number 7-4-3-9? Well, yes, but then this summons is correct. You are invited to the palace this evening for a reception honoring trade delegations. Your presence is specifically requested by the royal family. A carriage will collect you at sunset." Without waiting for a response, the courier bowed formally and departed, leaving Marcus holding the invitation like it might explode for several minutes. He simply stood in his room, reading and rereading the elegant script. The royal family wanted to see him? It made no sense. He'd filed all the proper paperwork when he'd arrived on Kairos, paid his merchant fees, kept his nose clean. There was no reason for royal attention, unless he'd somehow offended someone important without realizing it. The thought made his stomach clench. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and frantic preparation. Marcus's wardrobe was limited, but he did have one decent outfit, a dark blue suit he'd purchased for trade meetings that had never materialized. He spent an hour trying to get the wrinkles out, then another hour wondering if he should have spent his limited credits on something better by the time the carriage arrived. Marcus was a bundle of nerves. The vehicle itself was a work of artist's sleek crystal construct that seemed to float above the ground, humming with barely contained energy. The driver, another 4-armed being in palace livery, opened the door with a flourish. "Master Webb," the driver said with more respect than Marcus felt he deserved. "Please, make yourself comfortable." The interior was luxurious beyond anything Marcus had experienced. Soft cushions that molded to his body, cool air that smelled faintly of exotic flowers, and windows that provided a panoramic view of the city as they glided through the streets. Other pedestrians stopped to stare as the obviously royal carriage passed, and Marcus sank lower in his seat, trying to be invisible. The palace rose from the desert like a dream crystallized into reality. Spires of translucent material caught the light of the setting suns, refracting it into cascades of rainbow color. Gardens surrounded the structure impossibly green in this arid climate, with fountains that sent water dancing in elaborate patterns. Guards in ceremonial armor stood at intervals, their presence more decorative than threatening. Marcus's mouth went dry as they approached the main entrance. Broad steps of white stone led to doors that seemed to be carved from a single massive gemstone. As the carriage stopped, attendants rushed forward to open his door and guide him out. "Master Webb," one of them said, a female humanoid with pale green skin and kind eyes. "Welcome to the Palace of Eternal Stars. If you'll follow me, please." They led him through corridors that defied description. The walls themselves seemed alive, pulsing gently with bioluminescent light. Holographic art displays showed scenes from Kyrian history battles and celebrations, scientific achievements, and cultural moments. The floor beneath his feet was smooth and warm, almost organic in texture. Other guests were arriving as well, most in groups, all clearly more comfortable in these surroundings than Marcus felt. He recognized a few wealthy merchants from the marketplace, along with beings he assumed were diplomats or nobles from their bearing and elaborate clothing. All of them ignored him, which suited Marcus fine. The reception hall took his breath away. It was vast, with a ceiling that seemed to open directly onto the evening sky, though Marcus suspected it was some kind of advanced projection. Crystal chandeliers floated unsupported in the air, casting warm light over clusters of guests who mingled beneath them. Tables laden with exotic foods and drinks lined the walls, attended by servants who moved with practiced efficiency. Marcus accepted a glass of something sparkling from a passing tray and found a relatively quiet corner to observe from. He still had no idea why he was here, and the anxiety was making his hands shake slightly. "Honored guests," a deep voice rang out, silencing the conversations. Marcus looked up to see a massive figure stepping onto a raised dais at the far end of the hall. The being was easily 8 feet tall, with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal that refracted light into dancing patterns. His robes were magnificent layers of shimmering fabric that flowed like water. A crown of twisted metal and gems sat upon his head. "That's King Valorian," someone whispered nearby. "The ruler of Kairos." Marcus's heart hammered. He'd known this was a royal function, but seeing the king in person was something else entirely. The monarch radiated power and authority in a way that made Marcus want to bow, kneel, or possibly run away. "I welcome you all to this gathering," King Valorian continued, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "Tonight, we celebrate not just trade and diplomacy, but the connections that bind different peoples together. I have asked you here because each of you represents something important, a bridge between worlds, a chance for understanding." The king paused, and his eyes deep violet. Marcus noticed with a start seemed to scan the crowd. "But before we proceed with formalities, I have a special announcement. My daughter has requested the honor of addressing you all." A door opened on the dais, and a figure stepped through. Marcus's glass slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor in a spray of liquid and crystal shards. Several nearby guests turned to stare at him, but he barely noticed Dot. It was Seraphine Dot, but not the dusty, bedraggled woman from the marketplace. This Seraphine wore a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself, flowing fabric that shifted between violet and silver with every movement. Her hair, now clean and styled, cascaded over her shoulders in waves of pure silver. Jewelry adorned her throat and wrists, delicate pieces that enhanced rather than overwhelmed her natural beauty. Yet her eyes, those remarkable, violet eyes with flecks of gold, were unmistakably the same. "Thank you, Father," she said, her musical voice carrying the same quality Marcus remembered. She moved to stand beside the king with effortless grace, and Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. Princess. Seraphine was a princess. He'd given his last nutrition bar to a princess. "Several days ago," Seraphine continued, seemingly unaware of Marcus's internal crisis, "I walked among our people in disguise. It is a practice I undertake occasionally to better understand the daily lives and challenges of those who call Kairos home." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked intrigued, others uncomfortable, probably those who had ignored or dismissed her during her time in the marketplace. "I encountered many people during my wanderings," Seraphine went on, and now her eyes were definitely searching the crowd. "Most looked away when they saw me in my humble guise. Some were openly hostile. A few showed basic courtesy, but only one person saw need and responded with immediate, selfless generosity. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Marcus Webb of Earth. Seraphine's gaze locked onto him, and her smile was warm, genuine, and absolutely terrifying. Would you please join me on the dais? Every eye in the hall turned to Marcus. He felt frozen, unable to move, his mind still trying to process the fact that the woman he'd helped was royalty. But the attendants were already moving toward him, gently but firmly guiding him through the crowd toward the raised platform. The walk felt like it took both seconds and hours. Other guests parted before him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to envy to confusion. Marcus's legs somehow carried him up the steps to stand before the king and princess, though he had no memory of consciously directing them. Up close, King Valorian was even more imposing. The monarch studied Marcus with eyes that seemed to see everything, every fear, every secret, every inadequacy. But when he spoke, his voice held warmth. "So you are the human who gave away his last meal to help a stranger," Valorian said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus managed, remembering at the last second to bow. "Though I didn't know she was. I mean, I would have given it anyway, but—" "Peace," Valorian said, and the hint of amusement in his tone made Marcus pause. "My daughter has told me what transpired. You offered kindness without expectation of reward, without knowing who she was. That speaks more about your character than any calculated gesture of diplomacy." Seraphine stepped closer to Marcus, and he caught the faint scent of something floral and exotic. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said softly, for his ears alone before raising her voice for the crowd. "Your act of kindness reminded me why I undertake these tests to find those rare individuals who see people rather than positions, need rather than opportunity." She reached into a fold of her gown and pulled out something familiar. Marcus's eyes widened. It was the nutrition bar, the same one he'd given her, still wrapped and preserved. "I kept this," Seraphine said, holding it up for the crowd to see, as a reminder that true nobility has nothing to do with birth or wealth. It comes from the heart. She turned back to Marcus, and there was something in her expression that made his breath catch something beyond gratitude or royal favor. "Marcus Webb, I would be honored if you would accept my personal patronage. Your merchant license will be upgraded to royal favor status, granting you access to premium trading opportunities and palace markets." The crowd erupted in whispers. Royal patronage was no small thing. It could transform his struggling business overnight. But Marcus barely heard the murmurs. He was lost in those violet eyes, seeing in them something that went beyond political gestures. Your Highness, that's incredibly generous, but I don't deserve." "You do," Seraphine interrupted firmly. "And I hope you'll also accept my invitation to remain at the palace as my guest for the duration of the trade summit. I find myself curious about Earth culture, and I would welcome the opportunity to learn from someone who embodies its better qualities." The way she said it, the way she looked at him, made it clear this was about more than cultural exchange. Heat crept up Marcus's neck, and he was intensely aware of hundreds of eyes watching this exchange. "I would be honored, Your Highness," he said, because what else could he say? Seraphine's smile deepened, and Marcus felt something shift in the air between them. A connection, a possibility that made his heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with nervousness. King Valorian cleared his throat, clearly amused by the interaction between his daughter and the human merchant. "Well then, that's settled. Master Webb, welcome to the palace. I suspect your stay here will be educational for all involved." The reception continued, but Marcus moved through the rest of the evening in a daze. Other guests approached him now, eager to make connections with someone who had caught royal attention. Merchants who had ignored him in the marketplace suddenly wanted to discuss trade partnerships. Diplomats probed for information about Earth's intentions in this sector. Through it all, Marcus remained acutely aware of Seraphine across the room. She was surrounded by her own crowd of admirers and petitioners, playing her role as princess with practiced skill. But several times, he caught her looking his way, and each time their eyes met, she smiled in a way that felt private, intimate, a shared secret in a room full of strangers. As the evening wound down, an attendant approached Marcus. "Master Webb, if you'll follow me, I'll show you to your quarters." The rooms they gave him were absurdly luxurious, a suite, larger than his entire apartment back on Earth, with a bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom, and a balcony that overlooked the palace gardens. His meager belongings, transported from the inn, looked comically out of place among the elegant furnishings. Marcus stood on the balcony, breathing in the cool night air and trying to process everything that had happened. One simple act of kindness had transformed his entire situation. But beyond the practical benefits, the royal patronage, the business opportunities, something else occupied his thoughts. Seraphine, the way she had looked at him, the warmth in her smile, the care with which she'd preserved his gift. Marcus wasn't naive enough to imagine a princess could have romantic interest in a struggling merchant from another world. But there had been something in her eyes, something that suggested she saw him as more than just a curiosity. A soft chime drew his attention. One of the walls was glowing gently, and as he approached, it shimmered to reveal a communication screen. Seraphine's face appeared, and Marcus's heart did a complicated flip in his chest. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, her expression warm and open in a way it hadn't been in the public hall. "I wanted to make sure you'd settled in comfortably. Your Highness, it's too much, really. I don't—" "Seraphine," she interrupted gently. "When we're in private, please call me Seraphine. And it's not too much. If anything, it's insufficient thanks for what you did." "I gave you a nutrition bar," Marcus said, baffled. "It was worth maybe 5 credits. "You gave me something far more valuable," Seraphine countered. "You reminded me that kindness still exists in the universe. That not everyone sees interactions as transactions. Do you know how rare that is, especially in my world?" Marcus moved closer to the screen, drawn by the sincerity in her voice. "I imagine being a princess comes with its own challenges. More than you know." Seraphine's expression grew thoughtful. "Everyone who approaches me wants something: political favors, trade advantages, social connections. They see the crown before they see me. But you saw someone in need and helped. No agenda, no calculation. Just kindness." "It wasn't exactly calculated," Marcus admitted. "I was hungry too. I just couldn't walk past someone who needed help." "Exactly." Seraphine leaned closer to her own screen, and even through the communication device, Marcus felt the intensity of her focus. "That instinct, that compassion, it's who you are. And I find myself wanting to know more about the man behind that gesture." The implications hung in the air between them. Marcus swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. "I'm not that interesting, Your High Seraphine. Just a guy trying to make his way in the universe." "Let me be the judge of that," she said. And her smile held a hint of mischief that made her seem less like an untouchable princess and more like the woman he'd met in the marketplace. "I meant what I said about learning Earth culture. Perhaps we could start tomorrow? I'll give you a tour of the palace, and you can tell me about your homeworld." "I'd like that," Marcus said, meaning it more than he could express. "Good." Seraphine's expression softened. "Sleep well, Marcus Webb, and thank you again for the nutrition bar, for your kindness, and for reminding me that there are still good people in the universe." The screen dimmed, leaving Marcus alone with his racing thoughts. He returned to the balcony, looking up at the twin moons of Kairos and the unfamiliar constellations beyond. 3 days ago, he'd been a struggling merchant, with nothing but debts and disappointments. Now he stood in a palace suite, with royal patronage and the personal interest of a princess who looked at him like he was something special. Life on the frontier was certainly full of surprises. Marcus smiled into the night, already anticipating tomorrow. Whatever happened next, whatever this connection with Seraphine might become, he knew one thing for certain. Giving away that nutrition bar had been the best decision he'd ever made. In her own chambers across the palace, Seraphine stood at her window, looking out at the same stars. The nutrition bar sat in a place of honor on her desk, a reminder of the moment her carefully ordered world had shifted on its axis. She'd met countless beings in her life. Nobles, warriors, scholars, diplomats. But none had affected her quite like the human merchant with kind eyes and an open heart. There was something about Marcus that called to her, something genuine and rare that she wanted to explore. Her father's words from earlier echoed in her mind. "Be careful, daughter. A heart does not recognize borders or status. If you pursue this, there will be complications." Seraphine smiled, touching her fingers to the cool glass of her window. "I know, father, but some complications are worth it." Tomorrow, she would show Marcus her world. And perhaps, in doing so, she would discover if the connection she felt was real, or merely the fantasy of a princess tired of her gilded cage. Either way, she was certain of one thing. Marcus Webb had walked into her life for a reason, and she intended to find out what that reason was. The morning sun streamed through the crystalline walls of Marcus's suite, painting rainbow patterns across the floor. He'd barely slept, his mind too busy replaying the events of the previous evening. The revelation that Seraphine was a princess, the way she'd looked at him, the promise of seeing her again today, it all felt like a dream he might wake from at any moment. A soft chime announced a visitor. Marcus opened the door to find an attendant carrying an elaborate breakfast tray and a sealed envelope. "From Princess Seraphine," the attendant said with a knowing smile. "She requests your presence in the East Garden in 1 hour." The note inside was written in elegant script that seemed to shimmer on the page. "Wear something comfortable. Today, I want to show you the real Kairos." Marcus dressed in his simplest clothes, practical pants, and a light shirt suitable for walking, and made his way through the palace corridors with the help of a guide. The East Garden turned out to be a sprawling paradise of exotic plants and flowing water, somehow thriving in the desert climate through technology Marcus couldn't begin to understand. Seraphine was waiting by a fountain, and Marcus's breath caught at the sight of her. Gone were the royal gowns and jewels. She wore a simple flowing dress in shades of blue that complemented her luminescent skin, her silver hair pulled back in a practical braid. She looked more like the woman from the marketplace than the princess from the reception, and somehow even more beautiful for it. "Good morning," she said, her smile bright and genuine. "I hope you slept well?" "Honestly? Not really," Marcus admitted, approaching her. "I kept thinking I dreamed the whole thing." Seraphine laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a breeze. "I assure you, it's quite real. Come, I want to show you something." They walked through the gardens together, Seraphine pointing out plants from a dozen worlds and explaining their significance to Kyrian culture. But more than the botanical tour, they really talked about everything and nothing. Marcus shared stories of growing up on Earth, of the struggles that had driven him to the stars. Seraphine spoke of the loneliness of royalty, of always being watched and judged, of craving genuine connection. "It's why I go into the city in disguise," she explained as they sat beside a small pond, watching alien fish with iridescent scales dart through the clear water. "Out there, people respond to who I am, not what I am. Or at least they used to before word spread about my little test. Do you regret announcing it so publicly?" Marcus asked. Seraphine turned to look at him, her violet eyes intense. Not for a moment. I wanted everyone to know that there are still people in the universe who act from kindness rather than calculation. I wanted them to know about you. The way she said it made Marcus's heart race. Seraphine, I need to understand something. Yesterday, all that talk about cultural exchange and learning about Earth, was that just a diplomatic excuse? Or was I creating a reason to spend time with you? Seraphine finished, a slight smile playing at her lips. Perhaps a bit of both. I am genuinely curious about your culture, but... She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. But I'm more curious about you, Marcus Webb, the man who gives away his last meal. The man who sees people rather than positions. I want to know who you are beneath the surface. I'm not sure I'm that interesting, Marcus said, though his pulse was pounding. Let me decide that. Seraphine reached out and took his hand, her cool fingers intertwining with his. The touch sent electricity through Marcus's entire body. Walk with me. There's somewhere special I want to take you. They walked deeper into the gardens, following paths that grew progressively wilder and less manicured. Finally, they emerged into a clearing, dominated by a massive tree, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Its trunk was translucent crystal, and its leaves seemed to be made of captured light, casting prismatic shadows across the ground. The heart tree, Seraphine said softly. It's been growing here for over 1,000 years. Legend says it can sense the emotions of those who stand beneath it and shows them truth they might otherwise miss. As if in response to her words, the tree's leaves began to glow more brightly, pulsing with soft light. Seraphine led Marcus to stand directly beneath its canopy, and the light surrounded them like a gentle embrace. Truth, Marcus said, looking at her. What truth do you think it wants to show us? Seraphine moved closer, until they were merely inches apart. Perhaps the truth that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that day in the marketplace. That when I look at you, I see something I've been searching for my entire life without knowing it. That the idea of you leaving Kairos, of never seeing you again, makes my chest ache in ways I don't fully understand. Marcus couldn't breathe. Seraphine, ... I know it's complicated, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm a princess. You're a human merchant from another world. There are protocols, traditions, political considerations. But standing here, under this tree, I want to be honest with you. I want to know if you feel even a fraction of what I feel when I look at you. The tree's light intensified, as if encouraging his response. Marcus reached up, gently cupping Seraphine's face with his hand, marveling at the smoothness of her skin. I feel it, he said. From the moment I saw you in the marketplace, there was something. I didn't know what, didn't understand it. But seeing you again, talking with you, learning who you are beneath the crown, Seraphine, I feel like I've been searching for you my whole life without realizing it. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. Then perhaps the heart tree has shown us our truth. The question is, what do we do about it? Before Marcus could answer, a voice called out from the path. Princess Seraphine. There you are. They stepped apart quickly as an elegant woman emerged into the clearing. She was tall and willowy, with skin that shimmered like gold and eyes that held ancient wisdom. Her robes marked her as someone of high status. Lady Celesta, Seraphine said, and Marcus detected a note of frustration in her voice. I told you I was not to be disturbed today. Forgive me, Your Highness, but this cannot wait. Lady Celesta's gaze flicked to Marcus, appraising him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Word of your... Interest in the human merchant has spread throughout the court. There are concerns. Concerns, Seraphine repeated flatly. You know the traditions as well as I do, Lady Celesta said, her tone gentle but firm. If you wish to pursue a romantic relationship with someone outside the established noble houses, They must complete the trials of worth. It's been our way for centuries. Marcus saw Seraphine's jaw tighten. The trials were designed for Kyrian suitors. Marcus is human. The challenges may not even be possible for him. Then perhaps that is answer enough, Lady Celesta said softly. Your Highness, I say this with love and respect. You are the heir to the throne. Your choice of partner affects not just you, but our entire people. The trials exist to ensure that whoever stands beside you is worthy of that position. I don't need a trial to tell me Marcus's worth, Seraphine said, her voice sharp. I've seen it firsthand. But the court needs to see it, Lady Celesta countered. And frankly, so does your father. He has given you freedom to choose, but that freedom comes with responsibilities. Marcus listened to the exchange with growing dread. He'd been naive to think that whatever was developing between him and Seraphine could be simple. She was royalty, and he was ... what? A struggling merchant who'd shown one moment of kindness. What are these trials? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Lady Celesta turned her full attention to him for the first time. 3 challenges that test the worthiness of a potential royal consort. A trial of wisdom, which tests knowledge and understanding of our culture. The trial of courage, which tests one's ability to face fear and danger. And the trial of heart, which... She paused, which tests the sincerity and depth of one's feelings. And if I fail? Marcus asked. Then by law, the princess cannot pursue a relationship with you, Lady Celesta said simply. It is not meant to be cruel, but to ensure that our rulers choose partners who can stand beside them through all challenges. Seraphine moved to Marcus's side, taking his hand again in a gesture of solidarity. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. Marcus looked at her, at the hope and fear mingled in her violet eyes, at the way she held his hand like it was precious. He thought about the connection they'd felt under the heart tree, about the truth they'd spoken to each other. And he made his decision. I'll do it, he said firmly. I'll take the trials. Marcus. Seraphine started, but he squeezed her hand gently. If this is what it takes to prove I'm worthy of standing beside you, then I'll do it. I'm not going to walk away from something this important without fighting for it. Lady Celesta's expression softened slightly. Very well. The trials will begin tomorrow at dawn. Use today to prepare yourself, Marcus Webb of Earth. You'll need all your strength and wit for what's to come. After Lady Celesta departed, Seraphine pulled Marcus into a tight embrace. You don't know what you've agreed to. The trials are difficult, even for Kyrians. For a human, then I'll just have to be extraordinary, Marcus said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Besides, I've already won the hardest part. What's that? Seraphine asked, pulling back to look at him. Your interest, he said with a slight smile. Everything else is just details. She laughed, though tears shimmered in her eyes. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Marcus admitted. But I meant what I said under the heart tree. I'm not walking away from this. From you without trying. They spent the rest of the day together, with Seraphine explaining as much as she could about what the trials might entail. But beyond the practical preparation, they simply enjoyed each other's company walking through gardens, sharing meals, talking about their hopes and fears. Every moment felt precious, weighted with the knowledge that tomorrow could change everything. As evening approached, they found themselves back under the heart tree. The light was different, now softer, more golden as the sun set. Whatever happens tomorrow, Seraphine said, standing close to Marcus, I want you to know that you've already proven your worth to me. The trials are just formality, politics. In my heart, I already know who you are. Marcus cupped her face in both hands, looking deep into her eyes. Then let me prove it to everyone else too. Let me show them that Earth produces people who fight for what matters. who don't give up when things get difficult. Promise me you'll be careful. She whispered. I promise, he said, and then, because the moment felt inevitable and right, he leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were cool against his, soft and yielding. She made a small sound of surprise that quickly turned into something else as she pressed closer, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. The heart tree's light blazed around them, and Marcus felt something profound shift in his chest, a connection that went beyond simple attraction, beyond new romance. It felt like recognition, like finding something he hadn't known he'd been missing. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Seraphine rested her forehead against his. Come back to me, she said. Complete the trials and come back to me. Always, Marcus promised. The next morning arrived too quickly. Marcus stood in a massive arena carved from the living rock of Kairos, surrounded by hundreds of spectators who had come to watch the human attempt the impossible. King Valorian sat on a throne overlooking the arena, with Seraphine beside him. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the worry in her expression. Lady Celesta stepped forward, her voice magically amplified to reach everyone present. Marcus Webb of Earth, you have chosen to undergo the trials of worth to prove yourself worthy of courting Princess Seraphine. Do you accept the challenges freely, knowing that failure means you must abandon your pursuit? Marcus's mouth was dry, but his voice was steady. I do. Then let the first trial begin. The trial of wisdom. A section of the arena floor opened, revealing a complex holographic puzzle three-dimensional shapes that shifted and changed, covered in Kyrian script that Marcus had only begun to learn. The challenge was clear. Solve the puzzle using knowledge of Kyrian culture, history, and values. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm him. He'd only been studying the culture for days, not years. But then he remembered something Seraphine had told him during their walks through the gardens. Our entire philosophy is built on balance, the three suns representing wisdom, courage, and compassion working in harmony. Marcus approached the puzzle, not trying to solve it through brute force or memorized knowledge, but looking for the underlying pattern. The shapes weren't random. They represented concepts, relationships. And the script wasn't instructions, but philosophical principles. He began to manipulate the hologram, not just solving the puzzle, but explaining his reasoning aloud. In Kyrian thought, wisdom without courage is paralysis. Knowledge unused is knowledge wasted. Courage without compassion is cruelty. Action without empathy causes harm. And compassion without wisdom is naivety. Good intentions without understanding can do more damage than good. The puzzle shifted under his hands, responding to his understanding rather than rote memorization. The pieces aligned, forming a crystalline structure that represented the harmony of the three principles. Lady Celesta's eyebrows rose slightly. Impressive. You understand not just the facts of our culture, but its spirit. The trial of wisdom is complete. Do you wish to continue? Marcus glanced up at Seraphine, saw her proud smile, and felt his resolve strengthen. Yes, the arena transformed again for the trial of courage. The floor became transparent, revealing a dizzying drop into darkness below. Holographic creatures, recreations of Kairos's most dangerous predators, materialized around the edges, circling closer. Face your fears, Lady Celesta intoned. Show us that courage doesn't mean fearlessness, but the will to act despite fear. The creatures attacked. Marcus knew they were holograms, couldn't truly hurt him, but his body didn't seem to get that message. His heart pounded as he dodged and weaved, looking for the pattern in their movements. This wasn't about fighting. He couldn't defeat holographic monsters. It was about something else, Dot. He stopped running and stood his ground in the center of the transparent floor, even as the predators circled closer. Courage isn't about the absence of fear, he said loudly. It's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear. I'm terrified right now of these creatures, of failing, of losing Seraphine. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'll keep standing, no matter what you throw at me. The holograms lunged and passed through him harmlessly, dissolving into light. The transparent floor became solid again. The trial of courage is complete, Lady Celesta announced, and this time there was definite approval in her voice. One trial remains. The trial of heart. The arena stilled. This was the trial Seraphine had been most worried about, the one she'd refused to explain in detail. Now Marcus understood why. A hologram formed in front of him, a perfect recreation of Seraphine, so real he almost reached for her. But her expression was cold, distant. "Marcus Webb," the hologram said in Seraphine's voice, "do you seek my hand because of who I am, or what I am? Am I a person to you, or a prize? A partner, or a stepping stone to power and status?" Marcus's throat tightened. "You're everything," he said simply. "You're the woman who taught me that kindness can be found anywhere, even in the most unexpected places. You're the princess who sees beyond status and position to the person beneath. You're brilliant, compassionate, strong, vulnerable, playful, serious. You're complete and real and incredible. And yes, I want to be with you, not because of your crown, but despite it. The crown complicates things, makes everything harder. But you, Seraphine, you're worth every complication." The hologram flickered, its expression softening. "And if I asked you to give it all up? The royal patronage, the business opportunities, the comfortable life at the palace, if being with me meant having nothing but each other, would you still choose me?" "In a heartbeat," Marcus said without hesitation. "I came to Kairos with nothing but debts and dreams. I'd give up everything I've gained in a moment if it meant keeping what we have. Because what we have, this connection, this feeling, that's the real treasure. Everything else is just window dressing." The hologram smiled, truly smiled, and suddenly it wasn't a hologram anymore. It was Seraphine herself, stepping down from the throne and crossing the arena floor to stand before him. "The trial of heart has no right or wrong answer," she said softly, for his ears alone. "It simply reveals the truth of your feelings. And Marcus, the truth is beautiful." She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying across the arena. "I declare the trials of worth complete. Marcus Webb of Earth has proven his wisdom, his courage, and the sincerity of his heart. By the ancient laws of our people, I claim him as my chosen partner, and I invoke my right to courtship free from interference or objection." The crowd erupted in mixed reactions, some cheering, some murmuring concerns, but all recognizing the weight of her declaration. King Valorian stood, his expression unreadable, as he descended to the arena floor. Marcus's heart hammered as the king approached. This was the final test, perhaps the most important one. Seraphine's father could overrule even the successful completion of the trials if he truly objected. Valorian studied Marcus for a long moment, his violet eyes, so like his daughter's, seeming to peer into his soul. Then, slowly, the king smiled. "When my daughter first told me about the human who gave away his last meal, I was curious," Valorian said. "When she requested permission to pursue a relationship with you, I was concerned. But watching you face these trials, seeing the sincerity of your feelings and the depth of your character, Marcus Webb, I am impressed. You have my blessing to court my daughter and my respect as a man who fights for what he believes in." Relief flooded through Marcus, so intensely his knees nearly buckled. Seraphine grabbed his hand, her grip tight with emotion. "However," Valorian continued, and Marcus tensed again, "understand that this is just the beginning. Courting a princess, possibly becoming a royal consort, will bring challenges you haven't yet imagined. Political intrigue, cultural differences, beings who will resent your position. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus looked at Seraphine, at her hopeful, beautiful face, at the love and trust shining in her eyes, and felt certainty settle in his chest like an anchor. "Your Majesty." I was prepared the moment I decided to share my last nutrition bar with a stranger who needed it. Because that's who I am, who I'll always be. Someone who sees what's right and does it, regardless of the cost or complications. And being with Seraphine, supporting her, loving her, that's not just right, it's essential. So yes, I'm prepared for whatever comes, as long as we face it together. Valorian's smile widened. Then welcome to the family, Marcus Webb. May the stars guide your path. The king departed, and suddenly the arena's formality dissolved. Seraphine threw her arms around Marcus, holding him tight as the crowd's noise faded into background hum. "You did it," she whispered, laughing and crying at once. "You actually did it. Did you doubt me?" Marcus asked, pulling back to look at her. "Every second," she admitted. "But I also believed in you every second. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Marcus said, and kissed her again. This time in front of hundreds of witnesses who had just watched him prove himself worthy. Lady Celesta approached them, her stern expression finally cracking into something resembling approval. "I admit I had my doubts about a human completing the trials. But you've surprised me, Marcus Webb. Perhaps there's hope for interspecies relations after all." "Thank you, Lady Celesta," Marcus said sincerely. "Though I have to ask that final trial with the hologram. How much of that was actually testing, and how much was just Seraphine?" Celesta's smile turned mysterious. "The trial reveals truth, Marcus. What you experienced was exactly what you needed to experience. The rest is between you and the princess." As the crowd dispersed, and they finally had a moment of relative privacy, Seraphine led Marcus back toward the palace, their hands still firmly clasped. "So," she said with a mischievous glint in her eye, "now that you've officially won the right to court me, what's your next move?" Marcus pretended to consider carefully. "Well, I was thinking maybe I could take you somewhere nice. Show you some Earth-courting traditions. Though I have to warn you, they're probably less dramatic than holographic monsters and philosophical puzzles." "Less dramatic sounds perfect right now," Seraphine laughed. "Though I have to say, watching you face those trials was, well, let's just say it confirmed every good thing I already thought about you." They reached the palace gardens, finding their way back to the heart tree, where their relationship had truly begun. The tree's light welcomed them like an old friend, pulsing gently in the afternoon sun. "Thank you," Seraphine said suddenly, seriously, "for fighting for this, for fighting for us. I know it wasn't easy." "It was the easiest decision I've ever made," Marcus replied. "The execution was harder, I'll grant you that. But the choice itself? That was simple. I'm falling in love with you, Seraphine. Might have started falling that first day in the marketplace, actually. Everything since then has just been me realizing it." She cupped his face in her hands, her luminescent skin glowing softly in the dappled light. "I'm falling in love with you, too. My kind, generous, brave human who gives away his last meal to strangers, who faces impossible trials without hesitation, who sees me, just me, beneath all the royal trappings." They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, letting the reality of what they'd accomplished sink in. The trials were complete, the objections overcome, the path forward clear. Well, relatively clear. Marcus was sure there would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But standing there under the heart tree, with Seraphine in his arms and love in his heart, he felt ready for anything. After all, he'd already accomplished the impossible once today. What was a little interspecies relationship politics compared to that? "Come on," Seraphine said finally, tugging his hand. "I want to show you something. A place where we can celebrate properly, away from prying eyes and political concerns. Just you and me. Lead the way." Marcus said, following her deeper into the gardens. "I trust you completely." And he did. With his heart, his future, his everything. Because that was what love meant: trust, courage, and the willingness to face any trial for the person who made your soul sing. As they disappeared into the palace gardens together, the heart tree's light pulsed once more, as if in blessing. And somewhere in the palace, King Valorian watched them go with a satisfied smile, thinking that perhaps his daughter had found exactly what she needed in the most unexpected place: a human merchant with nothing but kindness in his heart and determination in his soul. Sometimes the greatest treasures were found in the simplest gestures, and sometimes sharing your last chocolate bar with a stranger changed everything.